All right, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another session in the Department of Dreams Festival. This afternoon, we've got with us Saltmarshe and Bea Karol Burks. And I'm really excited about this workshop because it's going to be about long-term thinking, and we're going to be developing some practical tools to explore long-termism. And yeah, I'm just really curious as to what comes out of this session and how people get involved in this. So I'm going to hand over to Ella and Bea now to carry on with the workshop. But just to say, if you can keep your mics muted while the talking's going on, just to minimize any background noise or anything like that. And yeah, we'll get going. Over to you.
Great, thank you, Daniel, and to all of the team at Civic Square for organising this incredible festival. So welcome to the long time, everyone. We are really excited about the next 90 minutes, and we are going to take you on a whistle-stop tour through the terrain of long-termism before asking you to help create tools that will cultivate long-termism in different places in our society. But before we do any of that, we thought it would be good if we all step into the long time together. So I'm going to take you through an exercise that is a meditative exercise. So for the next 10 minutes, I invite you to turn off your cameras if you'd like, and to come with me into the long time. So you can either do this exercise sitting down, or ideally, if you can stand up and have space to walk backwards and forwards 1 or 2 steps in either direction, that would be great. So if you can stand up and still hear me, wonderful. If you can't, no problem. And as I say, you're welcome to keep your camera on or off. So let's first start to take a moment and close our eyes. Take a deep breath and connect with the ground under your feet. Take a moment to connect with how you are at this point in time on the afternoon of June the 18th, 2020. And take another deep breath. And I invite you to bring to mind an older person that you care about. It could be a grandparent, a great aunt or uncle, or another elder who has mattered to you. They can be alive or they can be no longer with us. So bring this person into your mind's eye. And think of an endearing characteristic that they have. It could be a physical characteristic, the way their smile is, the wrinkles around their eyes. It could be a personality trait, the things they find funny, the things they love. But call to mind an endearing quality about this older person that you have in your mind's eye. Now, if you're standing, I invite you to safely take a step backwards. And as you step backwards, you're stepping back 40 years. Now, bring to mind this person 40 years ago. What would they have looked like back then? That endearing characteristic that you thought of, how would that have been present? Would they have still smiled in the same way? Would they have still found the same things funny? Briefly connect with that person 40 years ago. And now I'd like you to take another step backwards. And now you're at the 7th birthday of this person you've brought to mind. I want you to imagine this person at 7 years old. What would they have looked like? Think of that endearing quality. Would it have been present in them as a 7-year-old? What's a birthday party like back then? Who's there? What are they eating? Where are they? This is probably anywhere between 60 to 120 years ago, depending on who you've brought to mind. Now, take a moment to walk over to the window of the place where this 7th birthday party is happening and look outside that window. What do you see? What was the world like back then? How were people traveling around? What was outside the window? How are people communicating with each other? Just take a moment to connect with that world in the past around the 7th birthday of this person who you've cared about. In a few moments, we're going to be leaving the past. If you're standing, I invite you to take one step forward. So you're now about 40 years ago. And to take another step forward. So you're back in the present day. Take a moment to again connect with your feet, with the ground beneath you. And take a deep breath in and release. And you are temporarily back in June the 18th, 2020. It's late afternoon if you're in the UK. I'd now like you to bring to mind a little person that you care about. It could be a child, a niece, a nephew, the child of a friend, someone small who you care about. Again, I'd like you to think of an endearing quality of this little person. It might be harder if they're very little. It might simply be the way they look when they smile. It might be what makes them laugh. Again, connect with something that you love to see in this little person. This time we're going to move forward. So I'd like you to take one step forward, and you're walking forward 40 years in time. So can you connect with this person in 40 years? What will they be like? Think of that endearing characteristic. How will that have manifested in their lives? What do you think is going to fascinate them in 40 years' time? What do you think they're going to find funny? And I'd like you to take one more step forward now. And now you're at the 90th birthday of this person. So the 90th birthday of this little person that you care about. Now it's liable to be, depending on their age, at the end of the century, it might be 2090, it might be 2110. Take yourself to this 90th birthday and look at this person. Who are they at 90? How has their life been? Again, how is this endearing quality that you love in them now present in them at 90? Who else is around them? What's the feeling in the room? And again, I'd like you to now walk over to a window and look outside. What is the world like outside that window in 2100 or 2110? How are people getting around? How are they communicating with each other? What can you see as you look out of that window with the party happening behind you? Just take a moment to connect with the future. And now there's a noise and it brings you back into the room, and you see that the 90-year-old is proposing a toast. And on the table, you see there's a photo of you as you look today. It's, by that point, it's might be a pretty withered picture. And the person whose birthday it is has raised their glass, and they are asking everyone to raise their glasses to you. And they're thanking you. They're thanking you for something you've done that's helped them. What is that? What are they thanking you for? Take a few more moments to stay in the future, because we're not going to be here for much longer. So look at this 90-year-old, maybe say your farewell. If you're standing, take a step back. You're now 40 years in the future. And take a step back to the present day. Again, take a moment to breathe, to connect with the ground beneath your feet, and to arrive back to the afternoon of June the 18th, 2020, the moment that we all find ourselves together in. And very gently let your eyes blink open if they've been shut. And in a moment, we're going to put you into pairs in breakout rooms to reflect on the experience you've just had. Feel free to share what came up for you, what you saw in the past and the future, how it's been to walk across a time frame of anywhere between 150 to 250 years. And just give yourself a bit of time to reflect with your partner and arrive back in the present. And it would be great if you could turn your cameras back on. After 5 minutes, we will bring everyone back and come together. So yeah, it would be great to set up the breakout rooms now. Right, I think we've got everybody back now. So if you could mute yourself, that would be great. So yes, welcome to the long time. I would love to hear about how that was for more of you. So feel free to share any reflections in the chat. My name is Ella Saltmarshe. I am the co-founder of the Long Time Project, and I'm running the session today with Bea Karol Burks. Bea, do you just want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. I am currently the Director of Explorations at Nesta, but I'm wrapping that up shortly, and I'll be joining Ella on the Long Time Project.
Great. So yes, welcome to the long time. So what I'm going to try and do in 10 minutes or less, because we are already running a bit behind, is take you on a deep dive into long-termism. So if we could go on to the next slide. We wanted to start with emotion, because for us that is a key part of long-termism. So if we can go on to the next slide. or yeah, there we are. So we formed the Long Time Project because we feel it's really important to be able to connect emotionally with future generations. And we think that finding ways of doing that will change the way we behave in the present. So if we can develop different ways of engaging with the long term, we'll change the way we act in the short term. And one of the reasons that we wanted to start with that exercise of walking across time was because it was quite fundamental to the genesis of this project. So for me, this project started with a small person that I care about, my nephew called Finley. If we can move on to a slide to see Finn in all his glory. And Finn has been obsessed by doors. Like for the first 4 years of his life, you couldn't go near a door. If we go on to the next slide, and like any kind of door, shower doors, shop doors, front doors. And one day I was looking after Finn and he was playing with a cupboard door, and I didn't think very much of it because it was a door. And I was reading an article about climate change at the time, and I just got to that point in the article when they were talking about the terrifying scenarios for the end of the century. And I heard a noise and I looked up and I saw that like my tiny nephew Finn was using his very small heft to pull this cupboard down on top of him. And so I kind of dropped the article, rushed up, pushed the cupboard up, scooped up Finn. He started to scream at the injustice of being taken away from the best game in the world. And I started to cry. To his utter bemusement, I started to weep. Because in that moment, as I picked him up, I suddenly realized that the world that I'd just been reading about in this article was his world. It was very likely he was going to be around at the end of the century, and that I was not going to be there. I was not going to be there to scoop him up from danger as I just had. And that suddenly gave me a whole new connection with the future. I'd been working on climate for about a decade at that point, but something happened in that moment where everything became much more real, and I became much more personally invested in the future. So that incident led me to start thinking about time. It brought me together with my co-founder of the Long Time Project, Beatrice Pembroke, and together we have set up this project which addresses the kind of questions here. These are the kinds of questions that we are going to be exploring later on in this session. And I guess the key thing is about how do we develop a mindset of care for the future. So if we go on to the next slide, one of the things that we find is helpful to differentiate is the difference between long-termism and long-timism. So long-termism is a really valuable field. It is about predicting, preparing for the future. There are loads of really useful tools in there. There's lots of things that we use from the field of long-term futures. And the space that we're really interested in is long-timism, which is that how do we cultivate a sense of care for the world that exists beyond our lifetimes? And the reason that's different from some of the futures work is because you don't necessarily have to look forward to the future. Sorry, can everybody mute themselves, please? Thanks. So you don't necessarily have to look forward to care about the future. There are lots of techniques using deep time, looking backwards, that can get you to actually feel very differently about looking forwards. So this is the space that we're interested in. It's a space of care for the future. And it's something that we are hoping you are going to be able to help us with later on in this session. So why does this matter at all? Why do we need to worry about the long term? Well, actually, let's go back to the slide before we get onto why we need to matter. Let's just talk some definitions. So one of the things that comes up when you get into this field of long-termism is how long is long-term? There are lots of different definitions of long-termism, so it really depends on who you are. So for some people, long-term is 25 years. For others, it's 10,000 years. And for us, we realize if the thing that we're interested in is care, different communities are going to need different time frames to evoke a sense of care for the future. So we use different time frames depending on who we're talking to and working with, which could be anything from 25 years to 25,000 years. So on to why it matters. So yeah, why do we need to think about the long-term future? Haven't we got enough to be worrying about right now? Well, one of the main reasons that we need to be thinking about the long term is a phenomena called existential risk. So existential risk refers to the risks that we face as a species, so the risks that humankind faces. This wasn't really a big deal until the middle of the last century, because up to that point, whilst throughout human history, humans have from time to time been violent, cruel, and stupid en masse, that has never threatened us as a species, because we simply didn't have the technology and science for that to mean that we were threatening our very existence. Then, around the middle of the last century, we began to add that string to our bow. We began to develop the ability to destroy ourselves as a species. Arguably, that began with nuclear weapons, continued with biological warfare, with climate change, biodiversity loss, arguably AI. And so we have this growing field of threats that mean that we could have quite a short future on this planet, and that if we go, we're going to take many species down with us. So one of the things that underpins a lot of these existential threats as they develop is a sense of short-termism, is an inability to take responsibility for the impacts that these things will have in the future. There's a sense that while science and technology have developed very quickly, we haven't developed the cultural, political, and even spiritual practices to be able to contain these new kinds of risks that we face. And so that's why it's really important that we start to find ways of caring about the long term, of connecting what we do in the present to what happens when we're no longer on this planet as individuals, and to care about what that world is going to look like. So if the bad news is that there are all these existential risks, the good news is that there is a growing movement around long-termism. It is a movement that spreads across law, so we're seeing moves to give future generations legal rights. It's happening in politics. So in Wales, there's a Future Generations Commissioner. We've just passed a Future Generations Bill in Westminster. In finance, there's a growing understanding of the need to become more long-term. And, you know, and COVID has thrown this question about short-termism into new light as well. So the good news is that we're not alone in this inquiry. And so that leads us on to today and what we're hoping we're going to do together here. And really, at the heart of what we're doing is this sense of stewardship. And we want to encourage this emotional connection to the world that exists beyond our lifetimes. And we're particularly interested in the role of creativity. So this question, how can we use creativity to cultivate attitudes of care to the future, for the future, is the question that we want you to dive into in this session. And I'm going to hand over to Bea now, who is going to help give you the tools you need to get more practical. So Bea, over to you.
Amazing, thanks Ella. So Ella's done the whistle-stop tour of long-term thinking. I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of behavioural science and some of the tools that are already out there before we get really stuck into the practical side of this workshop. So we know that long-term thinking is really important, but as human beings, we're very biased towards acting and thinking about the present. We tend to discount the value of things that are further into the future, which means that we'd be more likely to accept £5 today than £10 in 3 weeks' time. And lots of us value putting petrol in our car today more than we do having a clean planet in 100 years' time. Similarly, MRI scans and neuroscience brain research has shown that when we are trying to imagine ourselves in the future, the part of our brain that's activated is the same part that's activated when we think about a stranger. So we find it really difficult to have that emotional connection to ourselves and to be able to relate to ourselves, let alone trying to think about other people. And then, of course, there's an equality element to long-term thinking where poverty has a massive impact on your ability to think far into the future if you're thinking job to job, day to day and meal to meal. But the really good thing is that there are some tools that can help us train ourselves into thinking about the future. Some of them are ancient tools. You might be familiar with the idea of the children's fire, which is used by the indigenous peoples in North America when they were trying to make big decisions or have really important discussions. At the center of the meeting, they would light a fire for the children. And in that sense, the future generations and the well-being of future generations had a presence through all of their discussions. And some people have said that if somebody came up with an idea that didn't take into account the thoughts of future generations, you could then throw that idea on the fire because it wasn't worth keeping. And there are some more modern day elements of this, like the idea of having an empty chair in meetings or in board meetings, in any of those important discussions, to represent future generations as a reminder that we've got to take their well-being into account. And the second example that I want to share with you is a more modern one that actually comes from data and computing, and started off trying to solve a technical problem about what happens when computers can't go beyond the year 9,999. But actually it also serves as a really neat reminder to help place ourselves in a much broader time frame, not just using the 4-digit calendar that we traditionally use and write every day, but adding an extra 0 onto the front of it to remind ourselves that time will not stop in the year 9,999, but actually it will carry on for millennia. And doing this is, the ambition of it is to also help us think not just in terms of decades and centuries, but millennia. And the last example that I want to give to you is one that borrows a lot from the indigenous cultures in North America, but was pioneered by a group of researchers in Japan who used different techniques in community deliberative meetings when discussing big important problems that were going to affect the community right now, but also would have implications for the future. And the people who you see in the green robes here are ones who are representing people from the future. They're representing future generations, and it's their job in the meetings and in the discussions to advocate for future generations. And the really interesting thing about this is that there's been a lot of research done into the impact of having discussions in this way. And the researchers found that not only were people more likely to take into account future generations during the meetings and while the discussions were happening, but they were more likely to also think about future generations in the future. So it had a lasting impact. So those are some examples to kind of get the creative juices flowing and to start testing some ideas out on what we might be able to do. The brief that Ella and I would like to share with you is to ask you to help design something to help people emotionally engage with the long time. So what would your equivalent of the children's fire be? Are there other ways that we can help situate ourselves in deep time, like the 10,000 year calendar? And we're going to, in a moment, put you into groups of 3 in different Zoom rooms and ask you to together either choose to design a new element of a ritual that we all know very well, like a birthday or a wedding, or to choose an element of your working life where you could introduce a new ritual or process or reminder for long-term thinking. Now, there should be in the chat in a moment a link to a shared Google Doc. Brilliant, thanks Ella. And in there are lots of templates that look a bit like this. So they've got little group numbers in the top left-hand corner, as you can see. And I think we should be able to get people going to the template working the template that responds to your Zoom room, but if that's confusing, do just copy it and add in another slide and work in that. And you can either start writing straight into the template, it's ready to go, you can type away if that's your preferred way of working, or if you're like me and you prefer a paper and pen, you might want to draw something that looks a bit like this and take a photo and then stick it into the Google Doc, or do a combination of the two. Do what works for you, basically, in whichever way you can show the best way to share your ideas. And equally, having an important discussion, there'll be a chance to share it at the end. So Cass, I can see you might be struggling in this, but do stick around to share some ideas afterwards. In that deck, hopefully you can also see there's some inspiration and some examples at the bottom. We've included 5 ways of connecting to the long term, things like mortality consciousness and deep time that might also help as provocations. So do spend a bit of time looking at those if it's helpful. And otherwise, either myself or Ella will be in the main room the whole time. So if you've got any questions, you can pop back and see us. And we're going to leave you 25 minutes for this. So, there's no rush. Spend a bit of time thinking about it. Spend a bit of time discussing it. Be as mad and wild and creative as you want to be, or be as simple as you feel like being. We're just interested to see what comes up and where some of the stimulus that we've given you earlier takes your imagination. So if we can start to break everyone into groups of 3. Is that everyone back in now? It looks like it. That felt like that time went really quickly, but I could see from looking in the slides, you've clearly all been thinking pretty deeply about this. There are some really, really cool ideas in there. Is there anyone, can I ask one of the groups to sort of share what you were thinking about or describe your idea and what it was that made you get there?
Okay, I'll start with ours. So we landed on this idea of a long-termism gift box that is like an empty, nice box that gets brought out like at wedding receptions or in other contexts, and people are invited to leave a gift for for the future generations, like a metaphorical sort of thing, and just to get people to think about like how that would be carried on in other rituals that you have in, like, because I guess weddings and things and these sorts of spaces, they happen generation after generation, so it's not something that would get lost in just culture change or stuff like that. It would probably be more long term. It would be carried by those sorts of spaces already. And how did we kind of get to this? There was a few different things. We had a conversation about what kind of influence we can actually have over the future, not something that has power over those who are in the future, but it's something that gives tools to apply judgment in their own context. And so we thought about how wisdom gets carried and things like that into the future. And Lorna and Krishna, if you feel like interjecting anything, feel free. But yeah, that was the idea. I think we were group 3, so you can see the slide.
That's amazing. I love that idea. Would you say is the idea that you put something in it?
Yeah.
What would you put in your box?
I don't think we've got that far. It could be anything like.
I'm going to be thinking about that this week.
Just how the box is framed, and like, I guess then people are just invited to put something in, and like then it gets people thinking.
It's a challenge for everyone later on to think about what they put in the future generations gift box. Who is in the water group? That sounds like an interesting one. I've only looked at them really briefly. So does somebody want to share some of the thinking behind that one?
I was wondering if anyone from my group would offer. I could try, and then Kate, Sabine, Roman, if you want to join in at any time, please do so. I'm Janvi, and we came up with this idea of a kind of a religion that's filled with little rituals, and the religion is called fluidity, of course. So the idea started with us thinking about the prompts that you gave about, it could be an everyday ritual that already exists, like a birthday. And we started thinking around, when you blow out a candle in some cultures, when you blow out the candle, you make a wish. So what does that, should it just be a wish for yourself, or can you also add in a wish for future generations? And then we started thinking about water and it's, the kind of timelessness, like Roman brought up this great point, a sort of poem that his daughter, I think, always recites, which is about the timelessness of water and how water molecules have been around from the times of the dinosaurs and will be around for much of the future. So that's how we kind of came into the idea of water. And then what we also really honed in on was this idea that if we work on little rituals that we perform every day, it is constantly in our subconscious to keep thinking about why we're thinking of something, not just for the past, for ourselves, but for future generations. So all of us came up with different ideas, and which is why it became this kind of religion. Where when it has different things. So in a moment, if you see running water anywhere, it could be a stream, a little waterfall, rainfall, anything, you dip your finger in the water and you say, you give a little thought to someone who might have touched the same water, and a wish for someone in the future who will touch the same water. Then we also thought about little greetings that, Roman was telling us about Helen Keller when she would touch flowing water, and this is how she would say water. And so we said, why can't that be a greeting between each other? Also, picking up from Pacific ceremonies where we'd say we have a bowl of water in between. We each tell stories of the past and present, and then you drink from, that same bowl of water. And so everything is about the timelessness and fluidity of water, and it's done over time. It changes little behaviors in the way we think about it. And yeah, in a nutshell, that's what it was. And if anyone from my group wants to add.
Oh, you said it so well. It's just bringing it into everyday life, so that if you came across a river or flowing water, you would recognize it. You would say hello. It would be like a friend. This would be totally normal. In fact, it would be really bad form to ignore the river. And I would love, Roman, can you tell the song that your daughter sings? Because this has it all.
Yeah, the song my daughter sings from the great children's musician Nick Cope. And one of the lines is, "It rains the same old rain that rained on the dinosaurs." And so there's this lovely timelessness there. But something else that was brought up in our discussion was, you know, our relationship with water through time is one that can have darker aspects to it as well. And I was mentioning this artwork by the Scottish artist Katie Patterson, where you go into the exhibition room and there's a phone number you could phone, and you phone the number and you hear the sound of a melting Icelandic glacier in real time, you know, and that's also part of our relationship with water. So there's some idea of somehow creating rituals that might also sensitize us to those different futures of water that we might have, those many different futures.
That's amazing. It really reminds me, I can remember when I was little, my dad telling me, when you put your hand in water, you know, you're basically touching Australia, but you've just added another dimension onto it, touching Australia and all the people who have ever lived and all the things that have ever lived beforehand. That's blown my mind quite a lot. That's absolutely amazing. Thank you. We've probably got a little bit more time. Does anyone else want to share sort of like the idea that they came up with, or even what that was like, what that made you think of? Like,
should I go for our group?
Yeah,
so we focused on a pretty much complete overhaul of the education system, which is maybe a little bit strong, but no, basically the idea was on a sort of maybe monthly basis to have an afternoon given aside to, I think we've called it futures immersion. So applying a future sort of scenario thinking approach to different subjects. And part of that would be sort of taking a Waldorf school approach and getting people doing more creative tasks or out in nature more, or really just looking at maths and like, how does that actually practically apply to the kind of future that I'd want to create? And then I went to a very cool art exhibition by a group called Marshmallow Laser Feast. It's this beautiful immersion. Basically, you've got this huge tree and the kind of sense of enormity and scale of nature basically versus you as humanity, and the sense of time that came with that. I thought if you took that approach, it's a way of engaging a generation, if you're looking at teenagers, which is the kind of group we were looking at, that in general is maybe quite hard to engage quickly in these more abstract ideas. And if you can kind of put them in scenarios through these more digital media that they're used to. And yeah, we had the idea of, you know, you pick the policies that Trump would choose and you see how that future plays out versus a sort of Jacinda Ardern approach and see how that is. And yeah, so that was where we got to with that. Steph, please, please feel free to add if I've missed anything.
No, I think you got it really well. I mean, it basically is so they connect also to their own future, you know, not just to this immediate, but really teenagers thinking a lot very short term. So all of a sudden they're being thrown into this different kind of thinking, this long-termism. And also there could be some games and everything. So I think it's a project we might actually do.
Yes, that's excellent. If you do it, I'd love to see how that turns out. That's so interesting. And a whole different way, you know, when people talk about the school of the future, I think they think about like technology and digital stuff. And actually this is a whole different way to think about it, the like curriculum for the future. That's awesome. My eye is being captured by the beautiful artist, the dice in the corner. Can somebody give us a quick run through of what you were thinking here?
We can be very brief because we spoke a lot and recorded very little. But the idea on page 7 was, we talked a lot about the need for imagination and the lack of and the need for the arts in imagining different futures and helping people to envision where we might be going, and the need to build empathy with different points of view. And then we started just to talk about a ritual of storytelling between people, and how maybe some kind of tool or totem could be used as a kind of storytelling device to prompt different ways to think about the future, kind of somewhere between storytelling dice that you see Jim Data's 4 futures concepts and indigenous ancient wisdom, all in one 6-sided shape.
Amazing. I'd really like one of those dice. I think we have to find somebody who can 3D print us one and share it with everyone. That would be amazing. So I could keep everyone here talking about this forever, because I'm really delighted that this has kind of sparked so many imaginations, and I hope that you can kind of carry some of these ideas into your daily lives. I'd love to, the next wedding I get invited to, a futures box is a really nice thing to take, and I'm definitely going to think about water differently from now on. I'm going to say thank you to all of you, and then hand over to Ella, who's just going to wrap up.
Great, thanks everyone. So now at the end of the session, we can reveal that this was a massive experiment. We've never done this before, and it's something we want to do lots more of. And so one of the things we were curious about was what would happen if we invited people to start creating in a very short amount of time. And it's so exciting to see that it works. Like literally in 20 minutes have come up with the gems of, the starts of some amazing ideas. So I'm really glad it was you in this room today, and that you just rolled up your sleeves so quickly. If any of you are excited about taking your ideas forward and would like support with that, or ideas about how to do that, then let us know. We would love to help you with that. We are going to be running this kind of process over the next few months with different groups of people. And we're particularly going to be doing it with groups of policymakers, because we are really keen to start to get people making policy and decisions engaging with the future. And we want to do that in this kind of more creative way. So if you are someone who works with policymakers, has good networks, and would be up for collaborating with us or connecting us in some way, then do get in touch, because that is exciting. And we're going to be doing that in the UK, but also overseas. And more generally, we would love you to stay involved and to join this nascent and emerging long-time community. So I am going to paste a link. I've realized what I actually was about to paste there wasn't the link to our website, but was a link to dinosaurs, because that was the last thing I copied, thanks to Roman's brilliant quote. So there is a subscribe box on our website, and if you sign up to that, then we will keep you in touch over the coming months. We're going to be doing lots. We've partnered with the RSA and the Serpentine, and we're going to be running a series of long time sessions running from July into the autumn, where we'll feature different thinkers and practitioners who are working in this space of long-termism. We are going to be doing more participative stuff, and we want to really grow this community of people interested. So yeah, come and join us, and join us in this very kind of experimental way of creating and cultivating a sense of care for the future. On this call, we've been very lucky to have Roman. Roman has a book coming out in July that I'm going to plug called The Good Ancestor. He has done an amazing job of making this terrain of long-termism accessible. So pre-order it now, and yeah, really excited to have that book out in the world. The exercise we did when we started the session was inspired by the work of Joanna Macy. And Phoebe Tickell is going to be running some more sessions over the weekend, I think on Saturday, that's going to be diving deeper into the work of Joanna Macy. So do go to her sessions if that sparked your interest. And yeah, I think that's it. I mean, just huge gratitude to the Department of Dreams and Civic Square team for their seamless organising and for this incredible festival. And yeah, really excited about creating the future with you all. So let us go forth, and I'm going to be touching wet walls for the next week. So thank you, everybody.